Hi, everybody. My name is Jonathan Stokes. I'm very pleased to be here, so thank you for having me. I work in patient-centered outcomes research. If you're not familiar with that, you are in good company. My friends, family, loved ones, I've tried to explain it to them. They never get it. They kind of glaze over. So I'll try and do better by you fine folks. I work for AbbVie. I oversee neuroscience for my function, and we do research in spinal cord injury. Also, importantly, I am a patient advocate for a small but mighty group called the Barth Syndrome Foundation. And why that's relevant is in 2018, we held our own externally led patient-focused drug development meeting. So I can talk through a bit of the considerations and the mechanics that go into planning and executing on that meeting. So before we dive right into what the patient-focused drug development meeting is, I think it'd be helpful to talk a bit about the regulatory landscape and how they look at drug development and how they evaluate new therapies. So the FDA has been around for over 100 years. I would say it's about 120. And it's surprisingly recently that they thought, should we be asking people that are taking these treatments, do they actually work? Are we meeting your needs? That was in 2006. So I was a very junior researcher at that time in consulting, and I asked my senior scientists around me, I was like, they published a draft guidance, and I was like, there's nothing new here. We're not learning anything. And they're like, that's not a problem. That means we're doing things the right way, and FDA is catching up to industry. So in 2009, they came out with the finalized PRO guidance. Where we really started to see changes is around 2012 with patient-focused drug development. And so this is the FDA definition of patient-focused drug development, and it's good, right? So it means that we are incorporating patient perspectives in a meaningful way into drug development. You'll hear terms like patient centricity, that's putting patients at the center. And by the way, I'm using the word patient in the very FDA sense of the word. I don't mean any insensitivities to the community or anything like that. I'm just going based on the current nomenclature that they're using. But in my opinion, and where I think PFDD is going, is patients as partners. I think about drug development in terms of an ecosystem of patients, advocacy groups, drug developers, researchers, physicians, regulators. There's HTA as well, and once we get a therapy, we'll worry about that down the road. So that's kind of where the state of FDA is right now, and it's constantly evolving, and we're seeing a lot of very encouraging changes. This is just a very quick slide to show just the importance of the patient voice being incorporated in drug development. It's not a nice to have anymore. It is an absolute requirement from FDA. You will not get something approved if you do not have patients at the table. And so this is different than what has happened in the past, and it's, again, a very encouraging sign as we go forward. You'll hear the term PED from drug developers, biotech companies, and also from regulators. This is kind of their new term. It's patient experience data, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It's anything that comes from an individual about their signs and symptoms of a disease, the impacts of the condition on their functioning in daily life, their experiences with treatment, unmet needs, and patient preferences on treatments. This data is something that a patient-focused drug development meeting is built for. It creates patient experience data that is then used by everybody. It's a publicly available evidentiary source. And so as part of the PFDD movement, they came out with a guidance series. There's 4 guidance documents, and it shows very clearly how FDA is thinking about drug development and evaluation. So first, you start with the first guidance, and that is, what is the target patient population? Who are the individuals with lived experience that we are going to focus on trying to find a therapy for? Next, once we've identified the right target patient population, what are the concepts that characterize their experience with that condition or disease? Once we've established what the concepts are that are important, how do we then measure that thing? So we have to build an instrument to measure it. So somebody had mentioned biomarkers. Those are very objective tests. So you could say taking your temperature is an objective test, doing your blood pressure, objective test. I'll talk about clinical outcome assessments, which is a subjective test. So no physician can ever tell you exactly how much pain you're in or how much weakness you have or how tired you are, because that's something that only you know and can rate. And then finally, once you have your instrument to measure your concept in the right population, the last step is how do we derive meaning from the scores that are produced from these instruments? How do we know and provide confidence that the drug is actually working or the therapy is working? And for me as a drug developer, if I'm going to be putting something into somebody's body, I want to make really sure that it is safe and it is doing what it is intended to do. So as I had mentioned, the subjective assessments are clinical outcome assessments. I think probably a lot of people, if you're familiar with these at all, you would be more familiar with patient-reported outcomes. That's just something from a patient about how they feel, function, or survive. I don't think patients are a good indicator of how they survive because they might have expired by that point, so they can't actually rate on that. But that's FDA terminology. ClinRO is just a clinician rating. A lot of times that's used in like dermatological conditions, so like psoriasis and things like that. OBSRO is for people who can't necessarily self-report. So if you think about like Alzheimer's, where your memory might be compromised, or children, a caregiver might report for you. And performance-reported outcomes, which are tasks that somebody has to do, like a memory task or like a grip strength for something like post-stroke. There's another one that I won't really go that far into, but it's like sensor-based technology, and it's like wearables and being able to track things digitally. So this is an example of kind of the PFDD model in practice. So I do a lot of work in migraine, being in neurology, and we had developed a product called Qulipta for use in episodic migraine and chronic migraine. So if you think about that first pillar of the FDA guidances, the target patient population, we split by diagnostic criteria and did separate studies in episodic migraine and chronic migraine. And if you think about migraine, I'm sure it's quite a common disease, and a lot of people probably either suffer from it or maybe know somebody that has it, but it's incredibly debilitating. And if you think about chronic migraine in particular, these are people with 15 or more migraine days per month. So you are largely bedridden, and you can't keep up with certain things in your life. Like I can't be a very good partner or a husband or a father. I can't be good at work or school if I can't be present, or if I'm present and I'm still suffering so much from the day before of having a migraine. So we talked with individuals with migraine, and these were the concepts that really bothered them. They couldn't perform their daily activities, they couldn't perform their roles in their lives, and they were in so much pain that they couldn't even move their head. So that was the physical impairment part. So that's the concept. That's the second pillar, and that's the second guidance from FDA. Then we developed how to evaluate those concepts. So the diary that you see, that took 8 years to develop and countless millions of dollars. PFDD meetings can really shrink that down, and that is proprietary to our company. So we own that diary. And then the endpoint is, for people who are not aware, all clinical trials have endpoints. That's basically just an equation. It's a calculation. You have somebody at the outset before they take a treatment, and you compare it to a follow-up period, and you oftentimes subtract. You might do proportions or something. But that's basically the calculation to determine whether a treatment works or not. So FDA reviewed, they saw our entire evidence package. There's 4,000 pages of documentation to support that one diary. And FDA reviewed it all, said it looked good, it gets approved, and now patients and prescribers can understand more about the benefit of the treatment that we've created. It's not just migraine days, it's not just your symptoms have improved, these aspects of your life are also going to improve. I'm going to kind of skip over this, but basically the main part of this is going through all of the US legislation and the great things that FDA has been doing, and they are quite self-aware. You'll notice that they are increasing their capacity for staff, increasing their training. They're realizing that they have to keep up with industry and drug development and researchers to make sure that they are adequately equipped to evaluate new treatments. So now to PFDD meetings. So in 2012, FDA came up with this idea of hosting PFDD meetings. They basically said, we don't understand conditions. You, patient community, come and tell us. We want to learn it. We want to listen. We want to hear you. And so what they did was they kept it quite simple, but simplicity is good. Come and tell us about the signs and symptoms of your condition, the impacts and how it impacts your daily life and your functioning. What are the current treatments that are available? How have those treatments not met your needs, if there are any treatments? And what are the outcomes that matter to you? And the people that they suggested to invite are largely part of that ecosystem I was talking about. They want patients, caregivers, they want researchers, drug developers, and they'll be there as well. And the output is this voice of the patient document. I'm going to go through why that's so important. But all of that is publicly available. The meeting is publicly available, all of the materials, slides, and all of that. And over here is just some of the conditions that they have conducted meetings with in the past. So around 2015, they basically were like, there's too many conditions for us to manage on our own, so we are going to invite communities to come and lead their own meetings. And they put together a set of criteria, and when I think about the spinal cord injury community, it fits very nicely within this set of criteria that they're looking for. So is it an area that needs patient input? Is it chronic, symptomatic, impacting your functioning, your activities of daily living? Is it something that is not normally captured in clinical trials? Is there something missing in our measurement? Are there currently no or few therapies available, or are the therapies that are available not addressing patients' needs? And is it a severe impact on a given subpopulation? So if you think about a recent example is COVID, right? So people who are immune compromised, they had a PFDD meeting for that specifically. And they suggest that you do this as a town hall style meeting in 2 separate stages. The one that we conducted, I honestly don't even remember if we followed this format, and I think it's largely very flexible and you can kind of conduct it how you want. And it goes back to those 2 questions that I had raised before that they were looking for. So the process to initiate a PFDD meeting is well articulated by the agency, and the NIH also has a toolkit available as a resource online. But first you have to identify a group or a consortium of people to lead the initiative, and that's part of what this is all about. We need to get people together to help drive this through. After that, you develop what's called a letter of intent. It does not have to be a long document. The FDA suggests 3 pages. It can go largely as long as about 5, but it's really talking about why there is an unmet need in this area and why we should be holding a meeting. They say that it takes about a year from when you submit your letter of intent to when you actually have your meeting. They review on a quarterly cycle. It's off by about a month. So it's like December 1st to February 28th, and then by March 1st, they will start reviewing for that quarter. They say that they don't necessarily suggest that you need event planners, consultant scientific writers, or other resources, and I, having gone through it, I would just strongly disagree. I think they just don't, for organizations that might not be able to raise capital for it or have the resources, they just don't want that to be a reason why you cannot have a meeting. One of the things that they do suggest that I think is very helpful is to building it into existing kind of regularly scheduled meetings. So the one that I was a part of that for my community was during our every 2-year meeting. So we had them come to our annual meet or biennial meeting and participate. So once you have the meeting, they'll help you plan, they'll help you try and set it up for success. The FDA will come and attend. It can either be virtual or in person or some kind of a hybrid model. And then what comes out of that is the community then drafts up a voice of the patient document. And that is, here is what we heard from our community about the things that are bothering them about their condition and things that they want to see from effective treatments. And they work with FDA to get that finalized and published. And once that's published, again, it is public document. Okay. So some of the benefits. So I went back and I talked to one of the founders of the Barr Syndrome Foundation. She is a wonderful woman. She has lost 2 of her children to the condition. And I was like, what did this give you? Like, what was your big takeaway from this? And why did you do it? And she's like, it gave us hope. We needed hope in our community, and we were tired of sitting around and waiting for a treatment to fall on our laps. And we are in the driver's seat now, and it gives us more agency over our direction. And it raises our visibility. So if you are part of an FDA meeting, people in the industry see that and they notice. And it might start galvanizing, start kind of pushing more momentum. But the biggest thing she said was it gave us hope. And part of it is, FDA hears you. And our meeting was in person, and the condition I represent is a very debilitating one, and during the meeting there wasn't a dry eye in the house, and that includes FDA. And it's a lot different to see p-values and data points than to hear somebody individually talk about their condition and what has happened to them and how it has impacted them. And that stays with you. There's a Maya Angelou quote. You won't always remember what people say, but you'll remember how it feels in the moment. And everybody will remember how that felt in the moment. The good thing about this is the voice of the patient document is also what was said in that moment. So that is utmost important. FDA hears you. The next two are very similar. So cross-functional learnings, once you get people together and you get researchers together and you get patients together, you get drug developers together, there's a lot of cross-pollination and sharing of ideas. The treatment that I was helping support for that patient advocacy group is now in a phase 3 development. That was found very much by discovery. I didn't realize how serendipitous discovery really could be. This was one PI at one institution talking to the biotech company and being like, I heard of this disease, I think this treatment might work here. So once you get people talking, things can happen. Connectivity is also important. It brings us all together as that ecosystem, and patients get hope. And they can start working with different groups and start contributing in a more meaningful way to research. And like I said, the voice of the patient document is the ultimate pull-through. It's publicly available. It is an evidentiary basis for people like me who are trying to substantiate that we are measuring the right things that are characterizing a condition, and the FDA has stamped it. So it saves a ton of time. If you don't do something like this, you'll have a bunch of different groups that have to do this anyway. And it's all fragmented, and they're talking to different pockets of people and kind of going on their own paths in their own directions. So I'll just put a couple of aha moments, I called them. So this is the Barr Syndrome Foundation. Like I said, I had talked to one of the founders, and I asked her, what was the one thing that you learned from this PFDD meeting that you didn't know before? And again, she has had 2 children with the condition, and she is very ostensibly a mother to the entire organization. So this is something that affects young kids, and she knows everybody and is a resource for them. And the condition is characterized by cardiomyopathy and neutropenia. So that means very weak heart and a very low, a weak immune system. And if you think about it from a caregiver's perspective, I want to keep my child's heart beating, and I want to make sure that they don't die from an infection. But when you talk to the people themselves, their mitochondrial cells they don't work properly. They don't make energy. So they're constantly fatigued. And it's a kind of fatigue that we don't understand. It is deep in your bones hurt of tiredness. And so that emerged as the most problematic thing for people from the PFDD meeting. And one of the things I was doing while I was in consulting was building out these outcome assessments to be used in clinical trials. So that was our key measurement target for one of our secondary endpoints, and was put into the pivotal trial to evaluate the concept of fatigue and ensure that we are doing the right things and that people are improving with their fatigue. Another example is in cystic fibrosis. I was working on a program, and unfortunately the treatment failed, and that happens. But I was looking through, and I was starting my research, and you try and think about how you're going to evaluate a condition. And I was looking through, and what I know about cystic fibrosis, it's largely a pulmonary presentation. Your lungs get kind of like gunked up. And I was looking, you kind of see what other people are doing. And there's another drug developer that has multiple products available in this space, and they really focus on pulmonary function. It's like, okay. So then I looked at the voice of the patient document, and if you'll look, gastrointestinal issues are the #1 problem for patients, their caregivers, and even in the report it says, if you're going to be developing a new treatment, make sure you're evaluating gastrointestinal symptoms too. So it was like, well, okay, I'm going to start developing a GI diary. And unfortunately, the program didn't go forward. But nobody would have known this without a PFDD meeting. And again, the FDA has stamped this and said, we appreciate this and understand that this is a key measurement topic for any drug that's being developed. So in summary, PFDD is a very strong initiative that FDA is on. They're really starting to kind of focus in a very more proactive light on really integrating, bringing patients as partners in drug development. These meetings are a tool, it's a mechanism to get people together without competitiveness, and to generate patient experience data that can be used by everybody in your submissions and in drug development. And the voice of the patient report is what lives on after that, and again, publicly available. So yeah, thank you very much, and I'll head on.